Hello and welcome to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. My name is Hunter Danson.
And my name is Eric Lintela.
And we are so happy to bring you this episode live from Rochester.
Woo, woo.
Woo! And we're going to be doing guitarists and that have shaped me and my guitar journey. But before we get to that, as we always do, what's in our glasses? Our mugs?
Yeah. Hunter, since we were together this week, we've had multiple things in our glasses. But right now we both have tea. I have a lemon ginger tea.
Mm-hmm.
And you?
Ginger turmeric.
It's nice. We've done a lot of talking today. And so it's nice to have something to soothe the throat later on.
What are you raising and pouring your glass for? Your mug, Eric.
Yeah, Hunter, since we're spending this week talking about guitars, musicians, guitarists, in your journey, I figured I would think about a musician that's impacted me. And so I'm pouring and raising one for Chuck Mangione, who recently passed away. That's the pour out. But raising one for him and his legacy. He's a Rochester native. Huge impact on the jazz scene in Rochester. Huge impact, I think, on jazz throughout much of our country. Remember growing up playing a lot of his music and orchestra and jazz ensemble. Chuck Mangione is well known for songs like Children of Sanchez, Land of Make Believe, Feel So Good, which actually made an appearance at the beginning of the Doctor Strange movie. Doctor Strange is performing a surgery. It's a real miss and real sadness to have him gone. Highly recommend checking out Children of Sanchez in particular. It's such an epic song that involves like the entire range, not only of dynamics but large different types of musical ranges even within it. Many great memories playing it and listening to it. That's me. Hunter, what are you raising and pouring one out for?
Well, I am raising a glass to Cars 3, which we both recently watched with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it with my son and cried multiple times. I'd seen it before, but the themes of passing on wisdom to another generation and learning when it's time to pass it on, to step down from being the fast and the glorified. And just a really well done movie. And the ways that they tell the story. I think we're going to have to do an episode on Cars at some point.
Yeah. The movie's got a lot of soul.
Yeah. And it was great to see my son. He's at the age where he's really starting to ask questions and understand what's going on and really get engaged in the story. And I'm pouring one out for the previous recording that we did of this episode. We made it 9 minutes and 45 seconds in, and the SD card ran out of storage. I forgot to check.
It was such a good episode, too. It's like an hour and a half of recording time gone. Not all of which would have made it into the episode, but...
So here we are again.
Next day, trying it out again.
Yeah. And, hopefully it'll be a little bit more structured.
It'll be more polished.
Yeah.
But I think it'll lose some of the characteristic energy we have.
Yeah.
Just because it won't feel like the first time.
Yeah.
we're having a conversation. Even though it will be a different conversation. It will also be a different conversation because of that.
But still, I'm thankful for the pearl that we were able to find.
Those first 9 minutes?
Yes.
What's the pearl?
The unheard rest of it.
Oh, yes, yeah. This is beyond VIP exclusive information.
Yeah.
So Hunter, what are we discussing today? And give me a brief overview of why.
So this is an episode that I've thought about doing for a while about guitarists, because to me guitarists are storytellers. A good guitar solo tells a story. Probably one of the most famous examples that I love is the Hotel California solo.
Mm-hmm.
There are guitarists that will impress you with their skills, who are very entertaining to watch, but to me, what's valuable as a guitarist is being able to use the sound to tell a story and make sounds that people remember. They're not just overawed by your technique or anything, but just totally entranced in the moment. When you hear you can keep listening to it in your head. If you've heard that solo before, it keeps coming.
In many ways, music, instruments help communicate what our soul's trying to communicate, but we might not have the words for.
Yeah. So, so this is going to be about guitarists that have influenced me in my playing journey. I've been playing guitar since I was 14. So that's over 15 years now. 15, 16 years.
17. Sorry, just reality check. Your numbers are off. You're older than you think.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
And I don't know, because rather than there's lots of content out there by guitarists who are a lot more accomplished than I am. About just talking about those instrumentalists specifically and what they're doing musically. I figured we'll try and just talk about the guitar journey itself and how they've shaped me.
Yeah, that's what our podcast is all about.
Yeah. So hopefully it comes across. It's not totally indulgent, and I'm going to be relying on Eric to make it interesting to other people.
Well, Hunter, help us by setting the scene. You said your guitar journey started when you were 14. Is that also when your journey with guitarists began, or do you think it was beginning even before then?
It was probably before then. The first guitarist, I would say, that led me to want to pick up the guitar was probably Tommy Shaw of Styx.
Okay.
I was just totally entranced by Styx. I listened to my dad's CD collection growing up. And so I listened to, Come Sail Away and...
Thought you were a sailor, much to my surprise.
Yeah. And I was just totally, blown away by Tommy Shaw's playing. The sort of stuff that I haven't really learned to do. It's sort of like hard rock shredding. It's very fast. I don't know if I can really do much of it, but yeah, I can't do it. Yeah, I don't know. I never really learned to play that fast or with that much gain, but the sound of it just made me want to pick up an electric guitar.
So let me pause you right here, because you've already said something that's a little bit surprising to me. It might be a surprising to others. You just made the statement that there are different ways of playing the guitar, which might be obvious to you, but like, you're telling me that just because somebody's a professional musician, great at the guitar, doesn't mean they can play every other, like, that there are other styles of the guitar that might be, or like type of playing that might be harder for them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily harder. It's what comes naturally to you and what moves you emotionally. So Tommy Shaw might have led me to pick up guitar, but I found myself pretty early on like gravitating towards blues.
Okay.
And playing blues. And blues is very... There are ways to play it impressively, but it's a very simple scale, very simple notes, very, it doesn't overawe you, but it's just...
So that was blues, is what you're telling me. Can you define a little bit more kind of what blues is?
So the Western musical tradition would probably zero in on like the blues scale, or what's traditionally known as the blues scale, which I started with the pentatonic scale, the A minor pentatonic, which is just... And those are just the notes. But the blues as a genre comes from Africa and African rhythms and notes, and came from slaves that sort of brought this musical tradition and sang songs while they were picking cotton and things like that, because they couldn't do much of anything else besides sing, that's where the blues comes from, and it's hard because you can't really define the blues, because there's not a lot of like hard records that would satisfy our modern historical understanding, like, because slaves were so undervalued and because people didn't keep records or anything.
Yeah.
So, you can point to specific artists and recordings, but there's so little known about those recordings and stuff, and the artists and their lives. Most of them died pretty obscure deaths. But what we have is this musical tradition that has been carried on by artists, and that has inspired some of the most famous guitarists of all time. And so much of rock and roll and the notes that we play come from the blues and the blues scale. not the best demonstration, but it's those notes all come from the blues, and the notes that all the way back to what slaves were singing.
Okay. So, 14-year-old Hunter in his room, got a guitar because of sticks. And what came next? What an instrument tells us a lot about a musician.
Yeah.
Can you share with me a little bit about the guitar that got you started, and from there, the music that led to your growth?
Yeah. I had my first electric guitar was an Esteban electric guitar. My parents bought for me, and not Esteban. And Esteban was sort of kind of like a beginner guitarist brand.
Okay.
And one of the first things I learned was the E major chord and the A minor chord. And those were like the first things that I was playing back and forth to myself, just... that was what I built most of my calluses on. And he sort of taught it. He was teaching those chords so that you could eventually play House of the Rising Sun.
Okay. There is a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun. It's been a road for many a poor boy. Oh, I know I'm one. I've done the ways Sorry for my poor vocal addition there. That was good though.
That's bluesy song.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Gary Lawson and the Talk of the Town. The sing-off. One of the founders of acapella.
Oh, all right.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. But, that was one of the first things I learned to play. And I just wanted to learn to improvise, really, I think. And you think about learning to improvise, you either go to the jazz or the blues. And the blues is what spoke to me. And so I learned this scale. And from that scale, you can get all your blues licks. I just learned, which notes you could bend. And which notes go well together. I would listen to blues. I would listen to backing tracks in my room and try to play along with them. Like slow blues backing tracks, or I would try to play along to House of the Rising Sun. going and going. But before long, I sort of honed in on a particular guitarist, and that guitarist was Paul Kossof.
Okay.
Probably the one that I would talk about the most if I talked about electric guitarists that I loved. And he was in a band called Free. Their most famous song is probably All Right Now. I can't really do a sufficient cover of it. It's like a rock and roll song, but that's not my favorite song of theirs. My favorite, probably solo of his, is this obscure live recording of Be My Friend. And I'll link a bunch of things in the show notes. But the particular thing about Paul Kossof is that he played a lot less notes
Okay.
than a lot of the other guitarists. But he could put so much more emotion into those notes. So rather than playing something like, he would play something like, not the best demonstration, but it's just the difference between playing a lot of notes that don't mean a whole lot, just like noodling on the blues scale, versus really picking your particular notes and trying to say something that means something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but because as you play more, you learn the blues scale. You can learn a certain amount, and you can just sort of noodle. I like to call it being a blues dad.
A blues dad?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means just playing your your favorite songs or whatever, and just kind of noodling with the scale and rocking out on your own, which is totally fine, I could do that sort of thing for hours, but it's not really making me a better guitarist. Anyway, getting lost on that tangent. But yeah, so Paul Kossof was a huge influence on me in really learning to, or trying to, put feeling into my notes, because Paul, he lived for such a short time. He died at 25.
Wow.
Related to heroin overdose.
Mm.
But he's not one of the most well-known guitarists, but other guitarists do talk about him. Joe Bonamassa, who's probably one of the most celebrated blues guitarist, plays very fast, can play pretty much everything. He talks about Paul and the way that he just puts so much emotion into a note, and could just, Paul Kossov's vibrato technique was really celebrated. There's a legend that Eric Clapton asked Paul Kossof about his vibrato technique, which I don't know if is true or not, but you listen to Paul's playing and just the way he could, I'm just gonna try and demonstrate it to show the contrast. Like, one guitarist would be like, and Paul Kossof would be like it's the same note, same fret. But the amount of... That to me is one of the strengths of the guitar, is that you can put so much variation into one note. And in my personal journey, I think that is the great strength of guitar versus other instruments, is no matter how fast you can play, you're never going to get faster than a keyboard or a synth or something. Because they just have all the notes in front of them, and they don't have to, do as much. You have to pluck the string, but that is the strength, is that you can pluck the string in different ways. I'm just going to not move my fretting hand, and just with my picking hand I can be like... There's so many different ways to play one note.
Yeah.
So that's where I started, is really loving Styx to get me into it, and of course lots of other classic rock legends, and sort of zeroing in on Paul Kossof as a real inspiration.
Okay, so you landed in blues.
Yeah.
You kind of jumped in. How did you grow as an artist or as a musician? Or what other musicians, as you continue to learn more about blues, continue to listen to music, be inspired, like, how did that impact your story? And what are those other stories maybe that were necessary for your growth?
Well, I think as I learn more about the blues, I think it's important to mention, like, the black artists that inspired the blues. So eventually I want to talk about, Clapton and Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck eventually.
And we'll get those on the next episode.
There. Yeah. And you'll notice that most of them are white English rockers. They're very skilled in their own right, but much of rock and roll history is sort of white artists inspired by blues songs, and they would do like sort of rock and roll covers of blues songs, and then profit and get famous. And it's not that I don't blame the artists so much as just the industry and the society that because it takes a certain amount of privilege to be in a band, to have an instrument and an amp, and
especially early on in the 60s.
Oh yeah, and be able to record, and it was much harder for black artists, and even when they did get recorded, they usually weren't the ones who were profiting the most off of it. Anyone who starts learning about the blues and rock and roll has to learn about Robert Johnson. And I don't know if you've heard of Robert Johnson before.
Tell us everything. Tell us about Robert Johnson.
So Robert Johnson is he's a legendary figure. Not a whole lot is known about him. His life wasn't very well documented, but there's a sort of legend about Robert Johnson where he was a blues player, sort of Depression era, and at that time a lot of guitarists would travel around and just play at bars and things like that, and Robert Johnson apparently was terrible. He would show up and he was just a bad guitarist, but then he went away for a while, nobody heard him for a while, and the legend was that he went down to the Crossroads, which is one of the most famous songs of his, is Crossroads, and he sold his soul to the devil. And when he came back, he was Robert Johnson, and he was playing and doing things that no one had heard of before. And if you go back and listen to his recordings, I think there's 29 of them. There's sort of like a legendary 30th recording. There's like a movie with the Karate Kid actor. Was it Ralph.
Macchio?
Yeah, I think it's Ralph Macchio. An interesting movie, but I don't know if I would strictly recommend it. But the movie's about trying to find his 30th mythical recording.
Okay.
But if you go back and listen to those recordings, they're just like lightning in a bottle. Just sounds and things that you've never heard before. And it's still, even in today's age, you go back and listen to them and you just... Nobody could make those sounds except for Robert Johnson. And a lot of the techniques from the Delta Blues, and not just the Delta Blues, he employed a lot of different things too in his playing. There's still... People are trying to emulate them. And so like Eric Clapton is a good example. Clapton is an inspiration to me because he was so devoted to the blues. And he really just spent his life trying to play the blues. And that's one of the things I admire about Clapton, is that he just was so devoted to the blues and didn't really deviate. Especially even through the 80s and 90s, and it's the whole era where people were experimenting with effects and things. Clapton was just playing the blues. But it's like Clapton, when he was learning to play, he said in his autobiography that he listened to, I think it was Bill Brunsey, who was a blues artist, and he said it hit him like a bolt of lightning, and that sound and that playing. And what Clapton did is he couldn't look up tabs or YouTube tutorials or anything like that. So he would just listen to it, and he got his grandparents to buy him a tape recorder thing, and he would listen to it and play it back and just try to learn it by ear.
Yeah.
And that's how you had to learn music back in the day.
Yeah.
And it really teaches you a lot in how to, because when you're playing, no matter how much musical knowledge you have, all you have to tell you that what you're playing sounds good, especially when you're improvising, is your ear. So for like 10 years, pretty much, I just tried to play the blues. And I'm still trying to play the blues. One thing I want to share that I think is essential to the sound of the blues is the idea of the blue note.
Okay.
So if you're listening to a regular A minor pentatonic scale, I'll just play it as... The blue note would be like... in between there. That's the blue note.
Is it always like a half step up or down from another note?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know enough music theory to tell you precisely, but in general, that's where it is. It's like, it sounds wrong, but it also sounds so right.
Yeah.
At the same time.
It's the one that like makes your eyes do like the thing.
Yeah, it's that sound,
that crinkle face.
The guitar face, when you hear something like, it just makes you make
the hurt so good.
YouTube guitarists, they'll just be like,
I wish you could see Andrew's eyebrows right now. Maybe you could hear his eyebrows. But this is,
yeah.
Some of the most expressive hunter you'll get is while playing guitar.
But one thing I discovered is that Beethoven knew about the blue note. So if you've heard For Elise, this is the blue note.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like the Moonlight Sonata, for Elise, that's, those compositions by Beethoven are blues, I think even Ray Charles had a quote about it, about listening to Moonlight Sonata and just being able to feel the pain coming out of it. You hear... this dissonance, it makes you want the resolution so
yes, it does.
badly.
Yep. Sounds like the beginning of House of the Rising Sun.
Right, it's the exact same chord. I guess you could do like...
I like it. That's a fun combo. Beethoven's House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I guess in my personal journey, starting with Tommy Shaw, the sound of hard rock, fast guitar, and then going to Paul Kossof as a sort of electric interpretation of the blues. But I'll set it up as my mountain, my guitar, because playing guitar, learning guitar, any instrument, doing anything that's hard, in art, it is like climbing a mountain. You start out with all this passion and this desire, and then you get on the mountain, it gets steep, and it's just... all that passion doesn't really help you. What helps you is just putting one foot in front of the other and picking up every day and trying to practice. Right now, I'm trying to get a little faster. I'm trying to build some speed, so I'll try to and I switched to fingerstyle. I haven't been playing with a pick for like a year.
Okay.
Just because I find that it gives me, which is partly inspired by Jeff Beck, which we'll get to, but I feel like it gives me a lot more sound to play with, a lot more dynamics to play with, because you can be very gentle, but you can also be very hard with it. And It gives you a lot of variation and dynamics, which you don't quite have with a pick. You can do another way, get those dynamics and emotion in other ways with a pick, but it's an individual journey. But I'm trying to get faster because I'm not quite as fast with the pick. It's just, doing the alternate picking. You can get pretty fast fairly easily with a lot of practice, but with fingers you really... I found this random classical metal guitarist guy, and he was talking about going really fast using 4 fingers, but and the way he does it, it's just but he's like, if you practice for 2 or 3 years, you'll get there.
So I've seen bass players that are doing that. I only ever got to 2. Sometimes I could get a third in there, but adding a third finger usually got me off beat.
Yeah.
Pretty significantly.
I can do a sort of tremolo thing with one finger. But,
Yeah.
But in order to build that speed and that kind of thing, learning your first chord, building your calluses hurts.
Yeah.
But the only way to do it is just to pick it up every day.
Yeah.
And try to play. And that's, it's climbing a mountain. So my mountain started really with Paul Kossof, I think, is what I zeroed in on as my first.
Where you wanted to be.
Where I wanted to be. And then for probably like 10 years, that's kind of where I stayed. I didn't really try much more than that, try to learn much more than that. I didn't even learn the major scale until like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I just sort of discovered like the relative minor major on my own so that I could use the same pattern in like worship music and stuff, because I play in church, and that was part of one of the main things that kept me in contact with the guitar, was just playing on Sundays and having to practice for that. And occasionally I would do songwriting and something like that, and the blues would come out there. But when I was in church, I would just be playing the blues, just sort of transposing it onto the music. Just using the same patterns and stuff.
Yeah. So you talk about this mountaintop that you hit, and then you kind of plateaued for a while, and quite enjoyed that. I can relate to that in my own experience with music and with other things. And now you're pushing through. I'm interested to know if there's any other. I'm interested to know if there's any musicians, guitarists that have inverted that mountain in your mind, or have found a way to kind of break the structure that have changed you and have changed music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and it's funny, the background that I come from in loving classic rock and things, I think in that era, 60s, 70s, 80s, the guitar was idolized in a way. The electric guitar and the sounds that you can make, because no one had heard the sound of a string vibrating over a magnetic pickup before. It was just a new sound. Before, you would hear an acoustic guitar, or like the first amplified guitars would be, kind of like just a nice sound.
Yeah.
But then, you had artists pushing amps, and the sound of rock and roll, which is really overdrive, that distortion, when I hit it lightly, you can hear it's distorting, it just sounds like a normal note, but when you hit it hard, you can hear the growliness. That is literally, that sound came from, they were just pushing the amp louder than it was supposed to go, and it would distort, and they used to use vacuum tubes to amplify sound, and the sound would distort in the vacuum tube.
Yeah, it's all math, right?
Yeah, and it was just like, and engineers would be like, why do you want to do that? And guitarists were just like, it sounds good.
I like it.
And so, in my personal mountain, I guess, I think of it as, there are guitarists now that are some of the best guitarists that have ever lived. Just in terms of the sounds that they can make, with the consistency that they can make the sounds, the variety of things they can play, their technical ability and their musical knowledge. But I don't think we will ever hear a name like Jimi Hendrix ever again. And we won't be able to, we're just not in the era of legend making anymore, because we've heard what the electric guitar can do. And now a lot of it is, the unique sounds that you hear on guitar are based around cool pedals that you can buy, which are mostly digital.
Yeah.
And I have a cool reverb pedal that I can make like cool sounds with. But if I turn the pedal off, it all goes away. And to me, that stuff is cool, but in a way, I feel like you're almost playing the wrong instrument. Like you're using a guitar almost like an organ or something, or like a synth,
Mm-hmm.
to create these soundscapes and stuff, which is perfectly fine. The guitar can be whatever you want it to be, and that's kind of the beauty of the guitar to me, is that if you compare it to a piano, pianos are heavy.
Yes.
Of course you can get electric ones now, but if you're reducing them to their simplest and historical designs, pianos are heavy. You could really only play one unless you were rich or you knew someone who had one, and you could get access to it. Guitars, instruments were expensive, but guitars were cheaper. You can carry them around. You can pick it up and play it in virtually any situation. Wherever you're going, you can take it with you. And that's kind of the beauty of the guitar to me. Part of it. So, very long tangent to say, to me, there's sort of you have Robert Johnson just creating the mountain to climb, in terms of guitar playing and the scale, the blues scale, and making everyone see what you can do. And then you have Jimi Hendrix coming in and just totally changing the sound of the guitar. Because, before Jimi Hendrix, you would have stuff like... You'd have some rock and roll things. Distortion. And then Jimi Hendrix would come in, with wah and fuzz. And this is going to be sort of a 2-bit impression, but
That was awesome.
And, that's my 2-bit impression. When you hear Jimi Hendrix play, even now, it just totally reconfigures your brain. It's just he was probably doing acid, and a lot of people listening to him are doing acid, but you don't need to do acid for it to change your brain. It's just what? No one realized what could happen. And it's funny, Jeff Beck, there's a story about Jeff Beck, who's one of my favorite guitarists now, and who's sort of like the top of the mountain for me. But there's a story about Jeff Beck who's in the Yardbirds. Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck all grew up within like 20 miles of each other, and they were all in the Yardbirds. It's like their first big band that they were in. Yardbirds were pretty huge too. But there's a story where Jeff Beck sort of walked in. I think he was in America at this time. He was out of the Yardbirds at that point. But he walked in and saw Jimi Hendrix playing, and he was up there playing like an animal. He was doing all of the things that I ever wanted to do on guitar, but doing it better and louder and crazier and wilder. And, you know, it was just like... apparently they like went on a bender. They played a bunch of clubs together, going from club to club and stuff. But you know, Jimi Hendrix, he's at the top of the list for greatest, like Rolling Stone greatest guitarist of all time. He's on all those lists at the top because you just no one made sounds like that, and no one would think of making those sounds. And there's people who, you know, maybe technically can do it more consistently or better now or whatever, but they wouldn't have been able to do it if Jimi Hendrix hadn't done it first.
Yeah.
And the sound of the fuzz is just like it's just I'm somewhat new to fuzz, so you know, I'm trying still learning how to use it. It just totally changes the instrument. It's as well. Still trying to learn how to do it, but
it's a very different sound than the sound you were making beforehand.
Yeah.
I wish people could be with me right now, like seeing you play. It's very mesmerizing. I keep having to blink my contacts back into place after you finish. Like, oh, I haven't blinked in like however many notes. I've blinked in 15 measures. I don't know what's going on here.
And you know, you have the wah as well.
So did Jimi Hendrix like popularize these effects? Did these foot pedals exist when he was playing? Did he make them? Was he doing it without anything? What?
I will look up some articles and put them in the show notes to be accurate. But Jimi Hendrix is definitely responsible for making them popular. And I think that he had like a guy, kind of like an engineer, electrical engineer, sound dude who was making him fuzz pedals and stuff. And the wah pedals. Vox is an amp company. He had the Vox wah, I think. And the Arbiter Fuzz Face is the pedal that he had. And I have a Fuzz Face style pedal for anyone who cares that I made.
There's no face on it, in case anybody's wondering.
Yeah. It's It's funny, if you look at the original pill, it's a circle, and it looks kind of like a smiley face.
Ah, okay.
But, yeah, they're like geranium transistors. And they just make the guitar signal explode.
Okay.
Because you turn it on, it sounds like... Wow. Yeah. And so, I guess if we can try and bring this around, for my mountain, Paul Kossof is what got me started on the journey. Jeff Beck is kind of the top of my mountain at this point. Jimi Hendrix chopped the mountain down.
Chopped it down?
Chopped it down. One of his most famous songs is Voodoo Child, when he said, "I'm standing next to the mountain and I'll chop it down with the edge of my hand." And he did. He did.
Yeah.
Go listen. But the last thing I guess I want to say about the blues and my sort of the way that I think about playing guitar in this part is, to me, there's a passage in Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans, where he talks about how when we don't have the words to pray and to express our pain, he talks about creation groaning in this corruption. And if you look at the world, we're living in a fallen world, corrupted. There's lots of beauty, but lots of corruption too. When we don't have the words, the Holy Spirit can groan with us and pray for us. And the closest audible sound of the Holy Spirit that I've ever come to, of the sound that I could make myself, is the sound of the blues, that groaning. So, when I play a solo, not always, sometimes we're just noodling or whatever, it's easy to get lost in it, but when I really am intentional about it and when I try to shoot for it, when I think about the way Paul Kossof played, and the way Jeff Beck played, and everyone has their own favorite players that move them, but this sound of just sound when you can hit the bends and really make it mean something. that's something audible that,
Yeah.
that we can use these, two pieces of wood bolted together and metal strings, magnets to make something to cry out.
I love that, Hunter. Thank you for sharing that. Would you play us out?
Yeah, and I think I'll try and use my slide if I can, because something I forgot to mention about the blues is also just the resourcefulness of players, and something that is particular to Robert Johnson in the Delta Blues is using a slide, which is a piece of metal or glass. A lot of time, could have been medicine bottles traditionally, but I like brass. I just like the sound of it. It's just really what I'm used to. You can use a piece of metal to slide up and down the string. And along with that, you can use different tunings and things to play open. More recently, I've been inspired by the way that Jeff Beck uses a slide in standard tuning. I've been trying to learn that. But, in this day and age, we have pedals and digital modeling amps and so many resources and so many ways that the industry tries to get you to spend money. And you can spend so much money on your tone and whatnot. And it's not that all those things aren't useful or fake, but, the guitarists just throughout history, they used what they had. And so for a lot of guitarists, they were able to find a slide, a piece of metal, or a medicine bottle or something to make a new sound.